Good evening and welcome to the 2025 Salary Cap Extravaganza here at Cover One. I am your host, Greg Tompsett. I am the only one who dressed appropriately for the event. We'll discuss with you guys in our next staff meeting. But let's go around the horn here. First, we have the first half of the Bills guys in the Air Raid Hour. You know him online. Steve Mathes, how we doing, sir?
This isn't where I park my car. How you doing? I'm not used to someone segueing to me. I'm used to doing the segueing. So this is a nice little change of pace here this evening.
It is weird. His other half of the Air Raid Hour, Mr. David Tilton. How we doing, David?
Doing good. I also enjoy being a pseudo guest on someone else's show. It's nice. So appreciate you guys having me on.
And for some of you who just finished up the fantastic show tonight from the film room and his own show, Disguise Coverage, Mr. Anthony Prohaska, how we doing, sir?
I'm good. I feel underdressed and disappointed in myself, but I'm stoked to be here.
So yeah, now the tuxedos seem kind of messed up. I'm gonna. All right, guys. We're gonna have some fun tonight.
You guys remember that old John Clayton Sports Center commercial? That's what I'm thinking Greg is right now. Like he doesn't really have a full tuxedo. It like cuts off right here. It's just
I wish if it was like a half belly shirt like the John Clayton one was, I would show that. I do have basketball shorts and slippers on. But if I had like a half belly shirt one and was it a Slayer shirt underneath?
Yes.
I think he had on. Yes. If I had a Slayer shirt underneath and like a ponytail I could pull out, the fact that he leaned into that like silly rumor is hysterical, and like dude is up in down his mom's basement and yells for meatloaf or whatever.
Yeah, he yells for like pizza rolls or some childish snack as like metal music plays as soon as it goes off air. It's awesome.
The fact that he leaned into that is just perfect. So rest in peace, John Clayton. Glad we gave him a shout out here tonight. Fantastic man. All right, you guys know our show here tonight, my favorite show of the year, and it's one where we try to have some fun. There was actually a little bit of news earlier today, so rumor was the NFL heard we were doing this show tonight and thought it was only appropriate that they gave us a range for the salary cap. I obviously got a ton of questions on it. I will say it was mildly good news. Most of the websites, you guys know I lean towards overthecap.com, but SpotTrack and overthecap.com were both using a budget of about $275 million for the salary cap. I thought that was pretty conservative because the last couple of years we had like 13% and 14% increases. This one came in kind of in the middle between some of the other years and went up. They gave a range of 277.5 to 281.5. I had projected 283, so I was in the ballpark there, but I thought there was a possibility it could even go higher to 285 or 290 if we saw the same 13 to 14% increase again. So I think they did owe a little bit of money back. I saw in the statement that there was a little bit of money they still owed back for the last part of like the smoothing they did of not having the COVID year drop down as far as what it did. This is the last payment to make up for that. And then there's that range that's there. Last year, we found out officially on February 23rd. So I would assume by like Monday here, we should know the official number. If it ends at 281.5, I'm going to be pretty happy. I think that's a good number. That's a really nice increase. If it's 277.5, I think that's a little conservative based on all the other things going on. But in general, the fact that it came in above the projected number is good because obviously the Bills are in the bottom 5 of the existing commitments to the contracts on file. But any reaction from you guys on the number that came out today, or any surprise that it was, in that range that it was?
Like my wife would say, I wish it was bigger.
I mean, it seems like it's kind of fell in the middle of maybe expectations, at least from what we see now, right? It was like that sort of in between. So I think a lot of people will look at it and be like, oh, this was good news. Because like if you're like going in with pretty much the lowest expectations, then it probably was good news for you. But if you're expecting into the mid 280s, then maybe this wasn't as good as you would hope. But I think it's fine. Like you said, if it ends up around 280, 281, I think that's going to be a good number.
Yeah, I'd second all those notions. Nothing really different. I prefer it to be as big as possible. That's also what she said. But yeah, take what we can get and expand the cap.
Yeah, and again, I do think there's more positive ones coming. I also want to pump the brakes a little bit. Our guy Brett Coleman, big fan of the network. We've had him on shows here. I love Brett. He made a statement earlier today about how big some of the increases are coming, how the Nielsen ratings are calculated, what a weapon that's going to be for the NFL and the new renewal. All of that is true. A lot of people he was talking about it very excitedly about the exploding cap coming up. He was talking about the extension of the next agreement, which at the earliest starts in 2030. So for that to actually impact anything this offseason, it would be the 6th year of a 6-year contract coming up. So there just aren't, like, I don't know if there's any non-quarterbacks that signed for that amount anymore. So again, Brett wasn't wrong. Like, there was a reason to be excited about that. I think a lot of people ran with that of like, oh, we should just spend all the money right now and backload everything. If you actually did that, it would all backload into 2029, like the last year before the renewal. So there's a couple of things there that I think just some people got excited about with it out there, but I understand Brett's excitement and get where he was coming from. All right, without further ado, let's jump into a little bit of the fun here tonight. Tonight's show was powered by our friends over at BetUS. They actually have some things asking, who do you think will make it to the playoffs this coming season? If you use promo code YouTube150, you can get your first deposit matched up to 150%, your second and third to 125%. I bring this up because I saw the first lady of Buffalo, Haley Steinfeld, actually had a video where she was asked if she could name all 4 of the teams in the AFC East. And to her credit, she played it off perfectly, because I'm guessing that in the moment she probably could name all 4, but even if she had like the moment of hesitancy of she wasn't 100% certain she could nail them all, she knew it was funnier to say the Buffalo Bills and their 3 sons, and that was funnier, and she delivered it perfectly. It was great. So kudos to her. I'm going to trust her. That's the only team that's going to make the playoffs out of the AFC East, because the 3 sons aren't going to make it. So check out our friends over at BetUS and use YouTube code or promo code YouTube150. Now, for the fun and why people are here for tonight, I'm going to start out by ruining some of the surprise. So there may be some people that tell you, oh, the Bills are in big trouble. There's all kinds of challenges and things that are going on, and that we're not going to be able to do anything. We need to pump the brakes on any big signings. Well, I took the liberty of going through and doing a mock off season myself. I extended Khalil, Shakir, and Terrel Bernard, and Christian Benford, and Gregory Rousseau. I brought back Ty Johnson, Matt Collins, Reggie Gilliam, Quentin Morris, Reed Ferguson. And then I restructured and broke down everything else that wasn't bolted down. I created $76 million in cap space before all that. So I could go out, I could sign T. Higgins, I could trade for Myles Garrett, I could sign Javon Holland and still have money left over to spare. So anything that we talk about tonight won't be as crazy as what this was. But when I went through and did literally everything that was there, I traded people away, I cut everything that was there, anything that I could do to create space, I was able to get it to 76 million and still have what do I have? I think I have 60 players under contract. So I was fully aligned with a full roster and everything that was there. So anything that we do tonight will be less crazy than what that was. And that's just to kind of brace everybody that the moves we're going to do tonight are all going to be based in reality. We're going to go through all the possibilities that we can to create cap space. Any individual move that we make tonight will hold water and will be something that I think makes sense and is something we can stand behind. We might get a little wacky or crazy at the end and some other fun ideas, but in general, all the moves we make tonight to accumulate cap space for the 2025 Buffalo Bills will be based in logic and reason, and will be supported and make sense on its own. We're probably just going to do more of them than what we'll see Brandon Beane do in a whole. But we're going to try to go through each of the main talking points of the spots that are out there that we think make the most sense for this team. And then we'll each take a little bit of fun at the end of what we might want to do with some of that space. But you can watch many of our other shows as we come up on our free agent wish list and trade targets and all the other content on shows like Disguise Coverage in the Film Room and the Air Raid Hour, as well as when Aaron returns to join me for Cover One Buffalo. So lots of good stuff on how we can spend all this money. Tonight is about putting as much money in that piggy bank as we can and see how much we can create. So without further ado, there are a couple quick and easy ones that we won't even spend a ton of time on debating. And there are 3 initial things. So I'm going to go through some of the different buckets. We have some base salary restructures. For anyone who isn't familiar, a base salary restructure is where you just take the player's existing salary, give it to him all of the money minus whatever the minimum salary is for this year. So for most players, that's 1.1, 1.2 million, depending on how many years you've been in the league. If you give them all of the rest of that salary, all the way up to that amount besides the minimum, and give them that in a bonus and add on any void years, you could spread that out and usually knock it down by 80% because you spread it over the 5 years and you only give them you only take the cap hit for the 20% that's remaining. There's another portion where we can release players. We'll talk about releases, maybe forcing a pay cut, a post-June 1st cut. We'll talk about how that's not quite as enticing as people like to talk about, but it is an option. We'll then talk about extension candidates. We actually do have a handful of players that giving them an extension can reduce cap. I'll talk about why most of our rookie players, that's not really a function because they're already making so little money that it doesn't create cap space, but part of the reason we're creating it is to extend players like them. And then we'll talk about a couple trade candidates. I don't think there's a lot of trade candidates that the reason you trade them is for salary, but there's a couple players where that could be a factor. Then we have a couple other players that are frequently asked about players that I don't think we're going to mess with their contracts, but we'll talk about why we may or may not do that. So those are the main buckets: base salary restructures, releases, extensions, trades, and then some other players that maybe we don't think fit in any of those four, but we'll talk about why we may or may not, and we'll go through each of those buckets. So the first one, we're not going to necessarily go around the horn here because they're pretty straightforward. And in our exercise tonight, they're all pretty easy yeses. Okay. So for a base salary restructure, in a real scenario, not one where you're going through, in that example I gave with $76 million in cap space, I restructured literally every player that had any money to be saved. So that one is everything that's not bolted down. So it's not realistic. The real criteria that I ask myself when am I going to do a base salary restructure is there any scenario where I could see the team releasing this player this year or next year? So is there any scenario where, hey, something weird happens in camp or that next season, even an injury, is there any reason? And I have 3 players that even if they got hurt, we wouldn't release them next year. They would still be on the team in 2025 and 2026. I have Ed Oliver, Dion Dawkins, and Taron Johnson. Those 3 players, they just recently signed deals, so they're not really in the bucket for extensions. We could talk about it if anybody has a creative idea for one of them. All 3 of them are playing at an incredibly high level. So I'm not worried about needing to go to them for a pay cut. I'm not needing to go through any of the other buckets from that standpoint, but they all have pretty good sized salaries. So doing a base salary restructure for Ed Oliver is $8.72 million in cap space created. Dion Dawkins is $9.83 million. Taron Johnson is $3.26 million. So those 3 where, I know they're going to be on the team in both years. I know that they're going to continue to contribute. If we do all 3 of those, it's $21.8 million in cap space of those 3 base salary restructures. So in an exercise like tonight, I would say I actually think all 3 of those are in play to be restructured by Brandon Beane. I think those are very likely scenarios. And depending on where this cap comes into play and what the official number is, that would basically get us, without anything else, doing any releases, anything else, all of a sudden we're in the plus. We have available cap space, and we either have somewhere between $4 to $10 million, depending on where the official number comes in and all the other incentives that have been hit there. Before I go around, does anyone have any objections to those 3 initial starting points? Okay, so we'll use that. So far, we have done 3 base salary restructures. We have created $21.8 million, and we are off and running in our moves for the night. We will now start with our actual decision points and discussion points, and we're going to start out right at the top. The one that comes up by far the most often. We'll start with you, Anthony. The name that comes up the most is Von Miller. We are in a spot where, when this deal first came up, even without the injury, a lot of us saw it as it's 3 years and then we'll see. Well, we had a lot of other complications. There were some off-field things. There were some on-field challenges. There were some injuries and then recoveries from that. We saw flashes this year where maybe it was back a little bit more, but still not the full thing that we needed. 6 sacks, I don't think was a complete disappointment, but also probably not the $17 to $20 million guy that some of the numbers are showing that he is. So right now we have a couple different buckets. He is one that often comes up with the question of the post-June 1st cut. So just to lay out the options before you let us know what your preferences would be. If we have the just straight release right now, going into the new year, we create $8.4 million. We do eat $15.4 million in dead cap Okay, that number is going to be eaten no matter what, whether we spread some into the next year or do it now. If we were to kick some of that into next year, we can actually move almost 9 million of that into 2026. However, and this is something many people don't know, if you do a post June 1st cut, you don't get the cap space until June 2nd. So in this one, yes, it sounds nice to get 17 million in cap space for Von Miller, but you don't get any of it until June 2nd. So Anthony, what is your case for your move with Von Miller?
I don't know if this is going to get me in trouble or not, one way or the other. But so I'll start with the easiest piece of it. I would like him to take a pay cut if possible. The biggest thing for me is just, it's hard for me to stomach this version of Von Miller in 2025 with the second highest cap hit on the team at $23.8 million. And I know the year that he had, I know some still think he's terrible and needs to be jettisoned into the sun. And then I know others thought that, kind of the flashes they thought that he showed were legit or wanted to kind of piggyback on the predictions they had for him in before the season started. He had 13 regular season games played. One of those was just that last game of the season against New England where he only played the 3 snaps to essentially get the incentive. So let's say 12 games. So we had 12 games played regular season wise, 31 pressures. 19 of those pressures came across 4 games for him where he wrapped up 5 against the Cards, 4 against Miami in week 2, 4 against the Jags, and then 6 against New England in week 16. So which is legitimate, right? But I feel like he kind of beat up on some poorer offensive lines. Across the other 8 games, he had 0 pressures, 2, 2, 1, 3, 3, and 1. I think he had a good year. I thought he was a solid high-end edge 3 to a lower to mid-tier edge 2 for pretty much the whole year. I think the tape and the metrics speak to that. I think he had some good run defense reps as well, including in that opening game against Arizona, helped stem the tide a little bit and turn things around in the second half. But I do think some of the efficiency metrics and his pressure numbers are a bit overblown when you watch the tape, when you look at the context. Even that wild card game against Denver, right? The 5 pressures, and it was like, man, Von is off on a tear. One of those is a 6-man pressure where Marvin Mims is in the backfield and he comes off the edge as a free runner. It could have been anyone in that regard. One of them, there's a design rollout to Bo Nix where he gets pinned inside by the tight end. Doesn't affect Nix at all, but it gets registered as a pressure. And then 2 others are late in the game on like 4th and 17s where he's just jumping the snap and guessing because the game is over. I think he had a good year. I don't like the cap hit that he's at. I say all that to say I would like him to take a pay cut. If not, I vote to cut Von and save the $8.4 million. I would really love if that post June 1st cut could be applied earlier, and then that would solidify it even more. But just, again, that's just annoying that the fact that if they do designate him post June 1st, it's not going to help create any room for free agents. It's just essentially for rookie signing period stuff and for when you're trying to expand the roster from the 51. But so I would present the pay cut option in as friendly of a way as possible to the team. If he's not down for that, I move to cut Von and then take that $8 million and spread it to some of the targets that I have. That's me. Greg, you're on mute. Oh, it's the bow tie. It's just distracting.
I think it's too tight. I think that it makes a lot of sense, and that the position we're in obviously is helped by the fact that he did do this last year. Mm-hmm. He took a pay cut last year when the team actually had less leverage than it does this year. The biggest leverage point Brandon Beane has is we owe him $17.5 million in cash this year. There is zero possibility that he's getting $17.5 million in cash on the open market. Just absolutely no possibility. So I rank this whenever anybody asks me. There are 4 options for Von Miller. There is release now, release post June 1st, pay cut, stay as is. Stay as is a distant 4th. By far the least likely outcome for Von Miller is that he stays on the team in his contract as is. I put it at 0.1% that he stays on the team as is. I think that the top 2 options are release now because, again, an $8.4 million release is a material amount of money. Like, that is something that genuinely helps us. It's the biggest release trigger amount of any player. Like we can't get any more money than that of releasing anybody else. So a $15.4 million dead cap hit isn't great, but getting $8.4 million in cap space makes sense.
To get you DJ Jones for a year.
So we'll go through some of those other numbers in where we spend the money. The post June 1st, I think, is third and the second least likely, again, because not that the 17 million isn't a nice number, but getting 17 million on June 2nd doesn't do us all that much good. That's way more than you need for in-season moves. A lot of people throw out but that's what we can use for the extensions. You don't need money this year for extensions. I'll ruin one of my surprises later on. Just as a refresher, last year we gave Spencer Brown a $19 million per year extension. $19 million per year, a huge contract. His 2024 cap hit went from $2.7 million to $2.93 million. It went up by $230,000. So we can extend Christian Benford and Khalil Shakir and Terrel Bernard and Gregory Rousseau and James Cook, and it would reduce our cap hit this year for those players. We don't need cap space this year to extend them. We got to pay attention. That's, whether you trade for a splashy edge rusher or sign a Javon Holland or whatever it might be, like those are factors in the future money of where that goes. But the extensions don't matter for this year. So getting 17 million on June 2nd does this team no good. So I think it's a distant third. I guarantee the conversation happens with Brandon Beane. So exactly what you said, Ann. I think it's Brandon Beane's preference, and they go to him with a very aggressive number. And I think they project like, hey, man, this is what we think you're going to get on the open market. Here's what, if you were a free agent, this is what we would approach you with. Here's what we would set as not likely to be earned incentives. The kind of flip side to the fact that he had a little bit of a bounce back season last year and got 6 sacks is any of the incentives that are 6 or below count against the cap. You would have to start at 6.5, 7 sacks or higher to do that. You can do another one like we had this past year where you can put in about reaching the Super Bowl and playing 30% of snaps in the Super Bowl. You can put that out there again. That was one of his incentives last year. So we can mirror a lot of what his contract had last year, give him a chance to earn some of the money back, drop the number way, way down. And I would say in my head, if the number to release him is 8.4 million, I would say I need at least $5 million back in cap savings on a pay cut as my breaking point. If I get $5 million or more in some creative structure, and then in my head, it's that, well, now the net savings is I'm kind of making him a $3 million pass rusher because I would have got that 8.5 back in savings, or I get the $5 million back anyways, and I get to keep him. Okay, well now, this is like, vacation brain money when you're justifying that, well, we're already here. Like I've already spent it, doesn't really count. It's not really a $3 million pass rusher, but I can justify to myself that, okay, well now he's like a $3.5, $4 million pass rusher. I can deal with that. And then you move on and deal with it. Because like you said, he is still producing as an edge 3 kind of guy. And I think we could still see that again. So we'll present that here. Let's kind of meet in the middle. So for our purposes, producer Chris is doing an awesome job kind of keeping track of what we do. We're going to count that we keep Von Miller and we get him to give us back, just to make the numbers pretty here, I'm going to say 6.2 million. So we can add it up and give us to a nice round number. We are now at $34 million in cap space created. $35 million in cap space created. So we are now at a nice clean number. We are keeping Von Miller on a pay cut. We are at $35 million in cap space created, and we will move on to our next candidate. And that goes to you, Steve. What are you doing with AJ Epenesa, his pass rush mate in the defensive end room?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? Because if you release him, you are eating $4 million in dead cap, but you are saving almost $3.5 million, which is not an insignificant chunk of change. When you look at AJ Epenesa, he gave you 611 snaps last season, which is not an insignificant number. That's a big number of snaps. 401 of them were pass rush snaps, 21 pressures, 6 sacks, 6 hits, 9 hurries. The pressures, hurries, batted balls were all down quite a bit from the past 2 seasons. So kind of middling numbers for a guy who's about to be paid this season or have the cap hit this season that he is going to have. I think the notable play most fans might remember from this season was the pressure he applied on Tua Tagovailoa that led to that pick 6 on Jamarcus Ingram versus Miami. To me, he's a perfectly fine wave edge player who knows your system. If you are keeping Von Miller, maybe you consider releasing AJ Epenesa, because do you really need 2 edge number 3s when you're really probably trying to hunt a guy to step into that edge number 2 or that edge 1B or 1A across from Gregory Rousseau? It's a tough decision because I don't think the performance so far has matched this contract that they've given him. But what are you spending that $3.3 million on? Someone better? Like, are you improving from AJ Epenesa with that $3.3 million that you save? So for me, I would keep AJ Epenesa as is. If you look at his post June 6 number, if we load up the edge room, we can move him at the end of training camp via trade, or we can release him and we can save about $6.2 million that way, eat a little bit of money in 2025, eat a little bit of money in 2026. So he could be a trade chip in August if we load up that room. So I would keep him for now, at least through training camp.
I think you're spot on. I really like that approach. And there's another player that has been thrown around here that we'll talk about later on. That doesn't, I don't even have queued up on any of the lists, but David Edwards is a similar guy for me. He's technically a guy that there's not a lot of dead cap hit that, you know, I've had people throw up like, oh, we could cut David Edwards and save $4 million. I'm like, you're crazy. We just had the best offensive line we've had in 30 years. Why would you want to cut a starter who's being paid a reasonable amount of money? However, I also have now, I'm in full, like self-fulfilling mode with Aaron Kromer, that if Aaron Kromer tells me that Alec Anderson and Tylen Grable are ready, then they are, because Aaron Kromer said so, and that means it was the right decision. So that's a decision that doesn't come until closer to cutdown day, because you can for sure get something back for David Edwards. AJ Epenesa is the same thing. Edge rushers and offensive linemen, like at cutdown day, those are the things people will pay real amounts of money for. Because 1, nobody has offensive linemen, and 2, edge rushers are the easiest plug-in in pro football. Is that, hey, you want to come play for our team? We go get the quarterback too. Go ahead. And it's much more plug and play for those kind of guys. So those are 2 guys that the number's not so high that it's crazy. And if Javon Solomon makes a huge step forward, or, you know, second round pick X is an edge rusher and has this huge breakout, and we end up renegotiating with Von Miller, and we, you know, are in a room where, hey, Javon Solomon's ready to contribute, or whoever this year's Casey Toohill, Dwayne Smoot type signing is having a really good camp, and all of a sudden it's, oh, we could do that. Or it gives you the spot, and Israel is saying here, AJ Epenesa will improve next season, cut Von, which is totally possible. That's a very doable scenario here. You give yourself the outs that, like, hey, we get to wait and find out and get to go through there and do that. So I think Epenesa is one where the savings, it's not nothing. The 3.3 million isn't nothing. Like, it's a possibility that number could make sense. However, if you, like you said, if you wait and we have other guys ready, 6.2 million, and this conversation will come up on the next player, is a number that, like, oh, that is kind of the amount of money you would need in season to do your other elevations and, you know, practice squad signings or an in-season trade. It's a good functional number. 17 million you don't need in season, but 6.2 is a nice number in season. And you could get it not just with a cut, you could probably get something back at cutdown day to be able to do that. So again, I think that it's probably, he's slightly overpaid. It's probably not exactly what he would get on the open market. He's another guy you could probably go to with a little bit of a renegotiation, pay cut kind of thing, move some stuff into incentives. All of those are possibilities. RJ here saying AJ could be in the Myles Garrett trade. Everyone can be in the Myles Garrett trade. You know, I could be in the Myles Garrett trade. David could be in the Myles Garrett trade. But sure, if Cleveland, and that comes up all the time. People ask me about like James Cook or different. If Cleveland values a player and that's like the reason you can or can't do the trade, anyone who's not Josh Allen, I'd have the conversation. I'd go into the boardroom and be like, all right, guys, they're asking for boom. Like, I don't want it to be Terrel Bernard or Khalil Shakir, but if they're saying, hey, I'm picking Khalil like I'm going to talk about it. I don't know that I want to do that, but I'm going to have a conversation. So anyone who's not Josh Allen, we're going to talk about it. All right. So AJ Epenesa, we are going to put into the bucket of keep as is. He will be in our watch in camp, and maybe that can be a trade candidate, or we see a breakout for him and we're ready to do a little bit more with. So that's the examples tonight. We're not going to be crazy and we're not cutting everybody and dropping us down to 35 people on the roster just to create cap space. I think this is realistic scenarios that we could see going through. One of the most painful for me, David, you have the most painful for me because it's a guy that I love. He's been on the network here with us before. He was a signing that we wanted and rooted for a while, and then had an amazing flash before his season 2 years ago, where his first 5 games, he was literally like up in the far quadrant with, it was just him and Aaron Donald on all the charts of how ridiculous he was playing. That's our man, DaQuan Jones, the soft-spoken monster in the middle. What are you doing with our man, DaQuan Jones?
Yeah, I got really familiar with a lot of the metrics on DaQuan Jones, did a very detailed analytics pack for Eric on him. And so I also found myself having a soft spot for him. And this is an interesting one to me because you look at this roster as it is with the defensive tackles under contract, and you really have DaQuan Jones, Ed Oliver, and Dwayne Carter as, I would say, your only 3 guys. You have Branson Dean, you have Zion Lago, and I understand that. But really, you have DaQuan Jones, Ed Oliver, and Dwayne Carter. So to me, if you release him right now, you get about $1.75 million in savings, rounded up to 2 if you want. And if you release them post June 1st, you get about a $5.5 million savings. So to me, the way I look at this situation right now with DaQuan, I know his play dropped off, and I know that he's kind of aged out of his elite level years, and that's all very understandable. But to me, with the guys you have under contract now, going into free agency, going into the draft, I think this is one where you have to wait to see sort of how free agency and the draft plays out. I don't expect the Bills to be in a situation where during free agency or during the draft that they absolutely desperately need $1.75 million in cap space based on all these other things we're going to do. So for me, I'm keeping him on the roster as we go throughout the offseason, as we get into free agency, into the draft. Having him on the roster now is not going to stop me from making significant moves on the interior defensive line, whether that's something in free agency or probably more likely in the draft, because you do need to add to this room, regardless of whether DaQuan Jones is still on this roster or not, just because of the numbers you have. And we know it's been a big talking point so far in the offseason. So for me, I'm keeping him as is for now. I'm not worrying so much about getting that $1.75 million savings now. I'm going to see how free agency plays out. I'm going to see how the draft plays out. And if it comes to a point in time where you've made some investments throughout the free agency period and the draft, maybe you sign a DJ Jones or something like that, and you draft a Kenneth Grant, let's say, and you make both of those types of moves, then yes, maybe post June 1st, it would make sense to then give you that $5.5 million relief. But I would say this is one of those where you need to wait and see. And it's not a wait and see because, like an AJ Epenesa situation where you think he can still produce. This is more of a wait and see to see if the way the chips fall in free agency and the draft work out in a certain way, you may be able to get rid of him then later in the summer. So for me right now, I'm keeping him as is, and it's a wait and see after June 1st, depending on how free agency and the draft go.
I think you explained it exceptionally well. He's a wait and see for very different reasons, and that was well said. That it's one, he's probably my number one candidate for the post June 1st. Actually makes a little sense for him. So getting 1.75 million in savings doesn't really do a lot for us now. So yeah, you can do it just to clean it off the books, but it also is a spot where if we do the post June 1st, you're also not kicking a crazy amount into next year. So Von Miller is a guy I don't want to do the post June 1st because I don't want to, like, it bothers me this year when I look at the books and I'm like, oh, we have $4.5 million for Trey White. I guess that kind of felt good. We didn't have a choice last year. We had to do everything we did to just get through the season and survive. I don't want to look next year where we didn't have Von Miller in 2025 or 2026. And in 2026, I see $9 million for Von Miller on the books next year. With DaQuan, you'd be kicking over like 3 million. So it's not like a crazy number that's going to bother me next year. Whereas if you do that, you create 5.5 million in cap savings, which again, that's almost the exact number that Brandon Beane tells us he likes to have in his pocket going through there. So if he starts to see some of those pieces come together, I love the names you brought up, David, that, if we were to have DJ Jones and Kenneth Grant, like, everything in the world is great. Like, that's 50% of the snaps. We have one of those two on the field at all times. Everything is great. Ed Oliver will have a career season and will eat all season long. If we start to go there, like, oh, okay, well, we have that in play. Let's say we land one of those type of players. I actually think DaQuan Jones is in a position where he could be the Austin Johnson role that we had last year, the Linval Joseph role from 2 years ago. We're like, hey, we still need a secondary one tech at 30% of the snaps. We think you can still do that. How would you like to come back for that amount of money, for the Austin Johnson money, where it's, hey, we don't really want to cut you, but you're not going to get $7.75 million out there on the market. How about we just cut that in half? And the $3.5 million we think is pretty fair. It's probably more than you're going to get out on the market here. You get to stay with the team that you like. You're good here. We think you're a good backup one tech, but we needed to go out and get that other guy. And again, whether it's a first round pick like Grant or whether it's another, one of those other or 2 second-round picks or a big signing like DJ Jones or one of the other guys there, it gives us a chance to be able to do that, slot him in where he probably is a better contributor than what he has been, and puts us into a healthy situation. So let's kind of count that as our plan for that. So for our accounting purposes, let's add on $3.5 million for DaQuan Jones that we'll count that we're going to get, whether it's a pay cut or whether it's creating the cap space. We'll hope we keep him as a backup one tech, but we'll add $3.5 million on there. That gets us to $31.5 million. All right, we got 2 more candidates to come up, a little bit on the easier side here. Anthony, do you have any strong feelings that we need to keep Mitch Trubisky on this roster?
No, I say cut him. I wanted to take QB in the draft.
So much.
Like, I just give me a QB on day 3 that can just sit and be in the system that's cost effective. If they cut him, you save the $2.5 million. That's still a decent chunk of savings when you factor in what the cap hit would be for like a 5th round QB or even a 4th if they really wanted to get like spicy or something like that. So I'll take the almost 2 and change that they would pocket from that. The cap hit difference of 1.6, 1.7, whatever it is. I just don't think if Josh Allen goes down, the Bills are in a bad way. And I don't think the difference between Mitch Trubisky and some rookie QB is that big of a difference to warrant him. Sorry, I just saw some of the comments. I just say cut him. Yeah, I just don't think
You have seen this year's draft class, though, right? Like, there's going to be 4th round quarterbacks taking top 10.
That is true. Like, this isn't a great one, but even if this quarterback class pisses me off so much. I feel like I'm just crazy for something. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. But yeah, I say cut him. Even if they want to bring in another one of Josh Allen's buddies and let them.
We also got Mike White.
Yeah,
that's the biggest piece for me. I just don't think the difference between Shane Buechele, Mike White, and Mitch Trubisky is the $1.5 million
all the same people
difference. And my biggest factor is how much fun was Joe Milton in week 18? Like, I want to have fun. Give me just like, that was so fun just to see a guy rolling around. Like, sometimes the ball went 15 yards over the guy's head, but a couple of them were pretty cool. That was fun. Just give me fun. Riley Leonard, I don't care. I was shocked. So you guys know, a lot of people on Twitter assume that like my knowledge of the salary cap applies to college football. It does not. I watch like a half dozen college football games during the year, and then I watch the playoffs. So like I know about the big time players that come around. I thought Jalen Milroe was like a Joe Milton kind of player. I'm like, oh yeah. I just randomly said like, oh, I would I would draft Jalen Milroe, and in my head I'm thinking like one of our day 3 picks. I got to take him with like one of our 3 5th rounders or 6th rounders. Like, sure, that sounds like a fun guy. And then I read like, wait, people think he's good at football? Like, that's not real. Like, we're not going to do that. So I would love that. So ideally, I don't care because I go on this rant all the time. Backup quarterback doesn't matter. Anyone who's not Josh Allen is equally not Josh Allen. There's just no like we're not going on a whether it's Tyrod Taylor or one of the like better higher end to hold down the fort guys or a Mitch Trubisky. They're not Josh Allen. So the function, I want 4 years of cost control of a rookie quarterback. We'll deal with that and figure out who we get in there, whether it's Mike White, whether it's Shane Buechele, whether it's a lovely 6th round pick that I've never heard of and I'll learn about after draft day. We are going to count $2.5 million. We're going to take that from 31.5 up to 34 million. And move over to Steve. One more, a guy that I was fully ready to move on from at one point, and that I won't lie, he kind of grew on me a little bit. We are going to have, as our friend Joe Biscaglia likes to get excited about every camp, I think we'll have a little bit of a Puntapalooza this camp because we will have Jake Camarda versus Sam Martin. Are you ready to move on from Sam Martin now and just hand it to Jake Camarda, or do we need to wait and let them Puntapalooza it off?
Buckle up, boys. We're about to get into the weeds here with some punters. Doing my research today, right? So Sam Martin, the January special teams player of the month. So the most recent special teams player of the month, he led the AFC in January in the percentage of punts inside the 20-yard line at 65%. Inside the 10-yard line at 30%, and inside the 5-yard line at 12%. So he was literally the best punter in football the last 4 weeks of the season of the National Football League. But the Buffalo Bills did sign Jake Camarda to a futures deal. This is the 2020 Special Teams Player of the Year in college football, two-time first team All-SEC at Georgia. I got super into punters in 2022. Got way too invested in punters. Matt Araiza was my punter 4 in that draft behind Jordan Stout, Ryan Stonehouse, and then Jake Camarda. So I had Camarda over Matt Araiza on my draft board in 2020.
And, kudos to you. Stonehouse and Stout have both been really good.
Yeah. That's one of the few things I get right. So I like to pat myself on the back whenever I get the chance.
These backs don't pat themselves.
Camarda had a great first 2 seasons in Tampa Bay. I mean, he was this NFC Special Teams Player of the Month, like his first month as a rookie in September of 2023. He ended that season averaging over 50 yards per punt. He just oddly fell off in the beginning of 2024, started the season with a 36.5 net yard punt average, which is 31st in the league. They ended up replacing him with Jake Browning eventually, a guy who used to be here with the Buffalo Bills. So this is a tough decision, but when you look at Sam Martin's contract, like let the new special teams coach make this decision, because if you cut him right now, you have a dead cap of 400,000 and you save 2 million. If you cut him after June 1st, you have a dead cap of 400,000 and you save 2 million. So why not let Chris Tabor make that decision? You also, and we've learned this here, and we're probably the only fan base that understands this, the guy who holds the ball for the kicker is pretty darn important too.
Yep.
So we got to make sure Camarda can do that as well. So why not let them at least fight for it in a training camp? And then if Camarda wins it, well, then Sam Martin can be that $2 million we use every year when, Brandon Beane might have kicked the can down the road on a guy to free up money to bring guys back and forth from the practice squad or sign guys off the street for injuries. Like Sam Martin's $2 million savings can be that money instead of kicking the can down the road on somebody. So I would elect to keep him, but I know other people might have some opinions.
I think you laid it out really well. There's no financial benefit to releasing him now versus waiting later. I don't think you want to put all your eggs in the basket of just assuming Jake Camarda is going to win the job. I think that obviously they're doing that, and I love the way that you presented it, that we can let Chris Tabor decide. Like, hey, you brought him in for a reason. We made a change at special teams coordinator for a reason. Pick the guy. Who do you want to put your chips behind? And I do agree, we are in a phase of an offense and a structure that I love the stat you rattled off for Martin when we do need to punt, because it's not zero. Like everybody punts at some point. We do have several games where it might be 0, 1, or 2, but like it does matter at some point here that I want it to be a guy who doesn't do what we saw Matt Araiza do in the playoffs, where he just would crush it through the end zone over and over and over again and lose that net 20 yards back over and over. And Chris, we have Corey Bajorquez, as we saw do that for years. The cannon is only cool when you can direct it. And there's only so many of who's the guy in Seattle that had the crazy run where he could coffin corner it Michael Dixon, where he would have that stretch where he could like coffin corner like 65 yarders at the 3-yard line. There's not that many of those guys. I want a guy who can do that and make it make sense strategically. Honestly, more because we don't get like stuck 3 and out back at our own 10 or 20 where you can lay into a kick 60, 70 yards. We just don't do it that often. We're not in that position. So holding matters more to me. Directional kicking matters more to me. And I'm open to the fact that Sam Martin might be the guy who still does that better. I kind of hope that it's Camarda just because we can restart the clock with a younger, cheaper guy. But I agree, there's no financial benefit to doing it now. So however that works out, that's a thing we find out on cut down day through the competition in camp, through the holding competition. Who does Tyler Bass like? Where is that leaning? I agree that there's no benefit. And even if we did it, it's technically $1.8 million in savings, but it's really just the net $800,000 because you're going to pay the other guy $1 million instead, and only one's going to have a roster spot. So it's a net $800,000. It's just on a material number that moves the needle for anything that matters. Okay. We are now through our first 2 buckets. We did our 3 base salary restructures for Ed Oliver, Dion Dawkins, Taron Johnson. We went through our release candidates, and we had a handful of pay cuts that we've gone through, plus releasing Mitch Trubisky and kind of kicking the can down the road on a couple. So some good discussion on some of the guys that are there. I do think that realistically, there's probably a bit of an either or with Von Miller and AJ Epenesa. I do think that there's a little bit of turnover needed in that edge room. So we'll see where that one ends up. We're now going to move to extension candidates. So the most exciting one, we're going to start with David, but I'm going to open up with a little bit. I spoiled it a bit earlier. Again, a reminder. Last year we paid Spencer Brown, and it's a good example. Spencer Brown, I think, was a great example of the risk reward of Brandon Beane, where we paid him ahead of time. We paid him very, very well. $19 million was more than I projected. I thought it was the fact that we were doing it early, I thought would come in at like 17 and a half or something like that. He got $19 million a year, a lot guaranteed, and then he exceeded it. And when you have guys like Brandon Thorne saying that he might be the best right tackle in football or is a top 5 right tackle, and in the same breath as guys like right behind Lane Johnson and Penei Sewell, he had him as his 3rd best right tackle. That is some incredibly lofty praise. And the fact, regardless of where he is, whether he's actually 3rd or maybe he's 6th or whatever it is, he played at a phenomenal level and looks like he's going to earn every bit of that. The reminder is, his cap hit went from 2.7 million to 2.93 million. So other guys who are also on cheap rookie deals, so Gregory Rousseau will be a guy we talk about here tonight, but Christian Benford, Khalil Shakir, Terrel Bernard, those 3, maybe it's a factor with James Cook. We'll put him in a separate bucket. But those 3, Benford, Shakir, and Bernard, even if we extend them, it's not going to create cap space. It's simply going to be a big deal that hits in future years. And the amount we would drop his current one to give them down to the minimum so we can give them a big signing bonus, to give them some cash now to offset some of the future years, all those different things, they're not creating cap space. So tonight, just pretend that we extended Christian Benford, Terrel Bernard, Khalil Shakir, all those are done, and they didn't move the needle. They didn't create cap space, but they also didn't take up any cap space. So for tonight's purposes, we'll say that we re-signed it and extended all 3 of them. We're going to talk about some other guys. One of the guys that is the most money that we can create by any single guy, but also a guy that it might come into play on whether it's this year or next year, is Joshua Patrick Allen. Josh Allen, obviously the franchise quarterback of the team, NFL MVP. That's fun to say. NFL MVP, Josh Allen. Last year, the reason I'm hesitant is we've heard some of the reporting. I think it was Dan Graziano who said that he, watch out for current MVP reaching a new extension. He is going to reach a new extension. It is going to be in the next 18 months, I'll say 16 months, probably. It's either going to be this offseason or next offseason. It is going to happen. It's going to be at an enormous number. I think it could be 65. It could be $70 million a year. Right now, the highest number is 60. I think there's a little bit of incentive to do it before Patrick Mahomes, to let Mahomes go over top, because both of them want to have the moment, and their agent wants the moment of highest paid player in NFL history, because either of them will be, and then the other one will go over top and get a little bit more than the other one does. So there is even a little incentive to do it early. The reason I had initially projected prior to the Graziano comment, it does make me wonder if he knows a little something. is that last year when they redid Josh Allen's contract, restructured, didn't redo, but restructured it. They restructured both his 2024 and 2025 number. So there's not quite as much money there to save this year. If we just do a normal base salary restructure, there's a little bit of money to be had in a base salary restructure, but not as normally it's like 29 or 30 million. So if we wait to next year, it is $30 million to do it. And you could basically give him a 6-year, $65 million a year deal and get, it's a crazy number. I think that works out to like 6 years, $390 million, and make $300 million of it guaranteed. And it could reduce our cap hit by like $25-30 million next year. If you do it this year, it does lessen some of that, but you could still do it. So Dave, where are you in wanting to approach Josh Allen? We know we're going to give him all the money and the moon and the stars. Do you want to do it now? Do you want to wait?
Well, you take a look at Josh Allen right now. Obviously, he's coming off the MVP season. He's the 14th highest paid quarterback in the NFL in 2025 when it comes to AAV, as it currently stands with the $43 million AAV contract. He still has 4 years left on his current contract. His current contract takes him through the 2028 season. And so to me, look, you did the restructure last year, as you mentioned. You potentially could lock him in for an extra year if you wait till next year. He still has 3 years left on his deal. I think this question really comes down to how quickly do you want his next contract to look like a bargain again, like this one is right now, where he's the 14th highest AAV quarterback paid in the league. Regardless of whenever he gets this contract, at the time that he gets it, he's going to be the highest paid player in the NFL. So do you want to do that now? And then in a couple years' time, okay, it looks like it's a bargain? Or do you do it next year when it doesn't really matter because you're going to still have him through, 2031, 2032, 2033, or whatever that is. And at that point, does it really matter if you do it in 2025 or you do it in 2026? To me, given he still has 4 years left on the deal, just how he is with this organization, I would probably wait until 2026 to do it. But I could understand why people would want to do it now, kind of get it over with, get him locked in. You still could get that. I think you had projected around $12 million in savings in 2025 if you do it. So to me, I think this maybe comes down to what other levers have you pulled at that point? Like, have you outright cut Von Miller? Have you maybe cut AJ Epenesa or made some other moves where you actually don't need to do this year because you freed up cap space in other ways? So I think if you're Josh Allen's camp, you're probably not so concerned about getting the extension in 2025 because you still do have 4 years left, including 2025, and you will be the highest paid player in the NFL as and when at the time that you do sign that extension. And from the Bills organizationally, if you do wait till 2026, you possibly get another extra year with him under that contract within the organization. So for me, I'm waiting until 2026, but I could be swayed either way on this. And I think it really, again, just depends on what other moves you've made to free up cap space in this sort of mock off season. So that's my preference. If we want to kind of say we do that for tonight to kind of free up the 12 million, I'm cool with that. But if it's me and I'm making the decision, I'm doing it in 2026.
You're spot on. I am exactly in the same mindset. I think there's a lot of reasons it makes more sense to be done in 2026. And I do think that there's a piece of it where we can still get some of the benefit this year. So in our scenario tonight where we didn't release Von Miller, we didn't release AJ Epenesa, we're waiting on DaQuan Jones, some of those different pieces, I'm going to have Chris grab $11 million in savings because whether it's through the extension and we do it ahead of time, or in tonight's scenario where we haven't been as aggressive with releases and we need to just restructure his deal and kick some of that into next year. I think that we're going to see some cap savings from Josh either way in the world we're in now. If Brandon Beane has another Black Wednesday and we release Von Miller and AJ Epenesa and DaQuan Jones, and we just kind of do a fresh start on the defensive line, maybe we don't and we wait and hold off and don't do it overall. I do want to address RJ's comment here because I get it a lot. The Tom Brady scenario is a very one-off anomaly.
He was getting money under the table.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff about the Alex Guerrero TB12 stuff of where money was being funneled. He was not taking a team-friendly deal. I'm over it. They didn't investigate it. They didn't want to go down that path. Josh Allen will give the Bills a very team-friendly structure. He will give the Bills a very team-friendly layout of the contract. He will allow them to move any money anywhere that it needs to go. And he will 100% become the highest paid player in NFL history. I am 100% certain of it. Now, it may be exceeded by Patrick Mahomes quickly afterwards, but they will be the two highest paid players in NFL history. And they will be a little bit above everybody else. And I think that right now, Dak Prescott's the only guy making 60. Everybody else is down in the mid 50s. So it jumps from 55 up to 60. I think it's going to be Mahomes and Allen around 65 million. And that they will reset the new number of where it's at. So Josh Allen is going to be the highest paid player in NFL history, at least for a little bit, or after Mahomes, and he will be for a while. He might be for a couple of years that he's the highest paid player, and he's still worth every single penny because he's amazing and he just won the MVP and he's going to get more of them in the future. So he will be team friendly in the structuring. He will allow them to spread it out. He might sign a longer term deal. It might be another 6-year deal that he does. And David brought up the point that there'll be 3 years left. He could add on. They'd kind of almost tear up the 3 that are there, add 3 more onto it afterwards, maybe even avoid year 2 on the end to play around with everything that's out there to do, like guaranteed option bonuses the next year. So if they did in 2026, you give a huge signing bonus. You could set a pre-scheduled guaranteed option bonus in 2027 that also goes out all 6 years and keep building those in to the deal each year. And he can let the team play around with those numbers each year as they need. He's already done that through the first couple of years of his deal. So tonight we'll add on 11 million more to our tally. We'll jump from 34 million to 45 million. And again, we'll do that because we weren't as aggressive with the releases that we had tonight, and we'll create it in that way. I think it makes more sense for Josh Allen to get extended in 2026. However, there's a chance we do it now, and one of them is you could do it now and then let Patrick Mahomes come over the top with a bigger number when he does it. That's one of the incentives to doing it earlier, so I won't be upset if that's the case. Next, Anthony has my favorite sneaky extension candidate. I get questions all the time about Terrel Bernard and Khalil Shakir and Christian Benford. Nobody asked me about this player, and I don't understand why. He's one of my top priorities to extend this offseason. Anthony, what do you want to do with our new man in the middle, our pivot, our replacement for Mitch Morris? I was devastated when it happened. Connor McGovern.
Cut him. No, I'm just kidding. I am very much, especially when it comes to the offensive line, but just in general, I'm very much, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And this offensive line, for the most part, is a well-functioning unit together as a legitimate unit. What they can do in pass pro, what they can do in terms of their run blocking, be able to function in gap schemes and zone schemes, the multitude of concepts that they are able to hang their hat on and how they differ and how they get to them, how it all functions together. And McGovern being in the middle of it. I remember, I think it was last year, right after the Morse cutting, after that Black Wednesday or Red Wedding Wednesday, whatever we're labeling it as, McGovern was on some podcast and he talked about, the coaching staff spoke with him at the end of the previous season, and like the move to center was something that was down the road. He didn't know when, he didn't know what it meant for Mitch Morris, but it was something that they discussed. I think this was a long-term plan. Obviously, Cromer has his hands in that. McGovern fits with what they're trying to do, being able to secure the depth of the pocket, his length, his anchoring ability, his play style, and just how he functions within that group. I would like to see this group stay together for as long as possible. Potentially, there's one person I would potentially maybe upgrade down the road. That's O'Cyrus Torrence, but he's still only in year 2. We'll see what he looks like in year 3 and year 4. I am in the camp of extending Connor McGovern. He is a UFA next year, but sitting and looking at him right now, he's in his age 27 season right now. I would extend him for multiple years, get him into that age 29, age 30 season if we wanted to, or at the very least, I'm looking at a 1 to 2 year extension just to keep that O-line solidified. Pair that up with the deal you got for Dawkins at left tackle, the deal you got for Spencer Brown at right. You solidify 3 out of the 5 spots, and you kind of go from there.
I think it's exactly right. You didn't even factor in the pizza parties and the value of the pizza parties that he throws. I don't think pizza counts against the cap.
Actually, it does more now in the new CBA. It counts
the new CBA comes into play. But I will say a lot of the reasons I was as concerned or nervous about Mitch Morse leading was the fact that they called him dad, the fact that he was kind of the adult in the room and the leader of what. It's because I didn't know that piece about Connor McGovern, that he could become that kind of galvanizing rallying point for the rest of the offensive line to build around. And Dion Dawkins is obviously very clearly a leader in that room as well. But him being able to do that, he's also the same age as Josh. Like, I think they can grow together and age well together to be here for a long time. I think that he's honestly probably in line for a bigger number than people expect. I think it's going to be like a 3-year, $30 million extension. I think he's going to be there in that $10 to $12 million range. I think he's played really well to earn that.
That would put him into what, like the top 5 or 6 paid centers in the league?
Yeah, I think he's going to be. That's where I kind of had it, was just behind the elite tier. I don't think he's in the absolute elite tier. I think Creed Humphrey is going to jump to the top of that list with his number. And again, every time that happens, you look at the current number, there'll be a couple other guys who jump up in there. So I think he'll end up sliding in at like the 7th or 8th highest paid center, which is about right to me. I think that he's the bottom half of top 10 centers in the league, is playing well. And that is a guy we want to have around here. And like you brought up, is a number where we can give him a market level extension and save like $4.2 million in cap space this year. So that's such a win-win in that, hey, it's a guy who's still young. He's hitting his peak right now. We want to have around for a long time, and it creates cap space. This is a perfect scenario for that kind of thing. So we're going to extend Connor McGovern. We're going to add $4.2 million more onto the tally. That'll give us up over $49 million in cap space now. And it'll move us on to a tougher one, not in the sense of creating cap space, but in the sense of my hardest one to be able to get my mind around what the number is, and that's Gregory Rousseau. So, Steve, I know we even talked about this in some of the prep for the show tonight. I have, I've looked at the contracts for a Jonathan Grenard. I think that that's a comp that makes a lot of sense from a style standpoint, in that only had the one kind of double-digit sack season before he got his big deal. I think that there's a lot of things I like about Gregory Rousseau's game, and that he can be a part of a very impactful pass rush group. I don't know that I think he's ever going to be like a number one lead pass rusher, and I'm nervous that someone's going to pay him that amount. And I don't know where my breaking point is. I want to be closer to 20 million. I think his team's going to want him to be closer to 25 million. And I don't know where my walkaway point is between those two, but the closer it gets to 25 million for the ask, he's the first guy in this Brandon Beane era where I almost want to let him play it out this year at the 13 million, franchise tag him next year, and then see where it goes afterwards, because the franchise tag's 21.4 million. And I think he's going to ask for more than that in his deal. So where is your mind on Gregory Rousseau? The reason it's tantalizing is if we extend him and find a number that makes sense, and it's a Spencer Brown, Ed Oliver type number where there's initially a little sticker shock, but then all of a sudden he could outplay it. Both Ed Oliver and Spencer Brown exceeded the value of their contracts and would have gotten more if they waited to sign it. That's a risk here with Gregory Rousseau. We could save $9.7 million. That's a big number. That is one splash signing by itself. We could extend Gregory Rousseau, and by himself, he could be the reason we get DJ Jones. He could be the reason we get Javon Holland. He could be the reason we get a big-time starter plugged in somewhere else, because we believe he's going to exceed that value. Where is your mind on Gregory Rousseau?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, right, 25-year-old, length and strength, defensive end. You got 734 snaps out of him in 2024 per PFF metrics, 63 pressures, 9 sacks, 17 hits, 37 hurries. Those are all really good numbers from a pass rush perspective. As you said, like, is he a premier number one edge? Probably not. Like, he's not the Myles Garrett's or the Max Crosby's of the world, but we all know as well how valuable he is as an edge setter in the run game. For those reasons and the 9.7 million reasons that you mentioned, I I think I would give him a 4 or 5 year extension. I think the money he's going to ask for is probably 4 years, 88 million, about 22 AAV. Probably going to have to give him 60, $65 million, guaranteed money. Do I have postseason concerns with him? Yes. Do I have that he's not Myles Garrett? That's kind of scary kind of money concerns. Yes. But I think we want that cap relief to go all in on this team. And I think if you can go all in by giving him a DJ Jones and then go make a trade for a Max Crosby and then draft another guy in the first, 90 picks of the draft, all of a sudden, I think Groot and Ed Oliver can become the best versions of themselves. And we might be cooking with fire here. So to me, I would invest in him, knowing that investing in him can also oddly help you surround him and make him a better version of himself right now. So I thought I was going to go into this not extending him, and I'm actually pro extension now. So I would vote to give him an extension.
Pro extension. That's a good phrase right there.
I like it.
My wife is also pro extension as well.
It's going downhill quick.
Nice.
Sorry,
That
I
was
think we're
waiting
after
for it.
10 o'clock. We're into the evening hours. So I'm in the exact same boat as you. I've flip-flopped on this multiple times. He's the exact kind of player that you draft, develop, and re-sign. You draft, develop, and retain. He, like you said, he's very young. We drafted him really young. He's just coming into his physical prime, just learning how to set those things up. And I do think that he's set up to be more of the like Khalil Mack off of Joey Bosa, more of the Jonathan Grenard off of Daniil Hunter. He's more of set up to be like a really high-end number 2 pass rusher. But there's a lot of really successful teams that have highly paid number 2 pass rushers that do really, really well. My nervousness is if we don't have that splash move, and I have a sneaking suspicion many of us will have a splash move tonight that involves an edge rusher. I'm nervous about him being our number 1, and that we saw that I don't think we have. If he's our number 1, we don't have a number 2. I think Epenesa and Vaughn are both number 3s, which is fine if they're 3rd and 4th. And they would play great off of if you just slot in a Max Crosby right up there at the top. Everybody's happy here, and it works great. And you put Kenneth Grant as the huge body next to Ed Oliver, and now everybody's happy. And look, we fixed the defensive line. All those things come into play of where it is. That's the number. It's going to take something like that. So the 22 million, 22.5 million, that might be less than what his representation is looking for. They might say, hey, if it's not 25 million, we'll wait because he's young and healthy and big, and he could have a great season this year. If he goes out and has a 14 sack season. Now, it doesn't have to be 18 or 20, but if he goes out and has a 14 sack season this year, which I think is in the range of outcomes for him, but that's I think at the high end of where it is, he'll get $30 million from someone. Like, we'll have to franchise tag him and have to he'll get $30 million from someone. Now, he has to risk that he doesn't get hurt, doesn't come in and have a 7 sack season, doesn't take a step back, but he's trending that way further and further. He's in position to do that. He knows we're going to make some other investments on the defensive line that should benefit him and have other guys helping him. That's what that number is going to take in order to do it. So I do think that you made a compelling case. I think for tonight's exercise, let's extend Gregory Rousseau. I'm curious, less so from our side, more so from his representation, if we're going to be able to find the number to do it. I have a feeling they're going to want no discount whatsoever. They're going to want the full value right up front. And I don't know where Brandon Beane's breaking point is there, but I do think that if we don't see any action, that's going to be why. So
according
for
to Brett Coleman,
purposes,
we're going to be fine. According to Brett Coleman, we're going to be fine.
Yes, if we just put all the money in the last year of the deal, we're totally fine. We give him a 6-year deal. We'll put $100 million of it in the 6th year. That was actually my projection for Myles Garrett. We'll just put $100 million in the 6th year where the numbers don't matter. It's all funny money. So for tonight's version, let's do your deal. We'll do a 4-year, $88 million deal, $22 million a year. Those will start in 2026 because it'll go bake in this year's 5th year option. So it'll be announced as a 5-year, $101 million deal. Everybody, agents love when the number has $100 million in it. So 5 years, $101 million. It'll let us create $9.7 million in additional cap space here, and that'll put us up there at $58 million in cap space. We're really cooking with gas here. All right. That takes us through our extension candidate. So we extended Christian Benford. We extended Khalil Shakir. We extended Terrel Bernard. We restructured Josh Allen. We extended Connor McGovern. We extended Gregory Rousseau. We have now created $58.9 million in cap space. We've got a couple names that are still floating around here. These are ones that are asked very often. David, we'll start with you. What do you do with Mr. Kaiir Elam?
Yeah, Kaiir Elam in our quote trade candidate bucket here. This guy's former first round pick. He's only started 12 regular season games in 3 seasons as being a first round pick. Some of that's his own fault. Some of that maybe it's the team's fault. He only turns 24 in May, so he's still a pretty young player. Look, I'm not sure if he would be used as a sweetener, as a standalone. Perhaps there's a trade where the Bills, swing for a bigger edge rusher and maybe he gets thrown in to slightly reduce the cost. But I'm really not seeing him as more than at most 6th, but more than likely 7th round pick as a standalone value, or maybe in a pick swap, you come in with a 6th in Elam and you get a 5th or something to that nature. So what do we look at? We look at teams that maybe could be interested in his services in 2025 and maybe beyond. And you start looking at the teams that maybe played the most man coverage in 2024. The Jaguars and the Cardinals were the 2 teams with the highest man coverage rates in 2024. The Jags could certainly use someone opposite of Tyson Campbell, with Montaric Brown sort of struggling a bit. A new regime there under Liam Cohen. The Jags also have multiple 6th round draft picks. They have 10 draft picks this year. So looking into that, the Jaguars do have draft picks to kind of play around with under this new regime. Maybe a 6th round pick and gets you Kaiir Elam over to the Jacksonville Jaguars, possibly, right? And then you look at the Cardinals. They don't have a lot of draft picks. They do have a 7th round pick, but they only actually have 6 draft picks this year. So you wonder if they'd be even willing to give up their 7th round pick. And then you can kind of start to go from there. But as you put in the show notes, you save $2.57 million if you are able to trade Kaiir Elam. My whole thing with Kaiir Elam is this. You're not really you're not going to get a return on him. You got to throw out the fact that you drafted him in the first round at this point. It's been 3 years. Like, that's gone. It's a $2.5 million save against your cap if you're able to trade him, if someone's willing to play ball with you on a trade. But then you look at the roster and you look at some of the coaching changes. The Bills bringing in new nickel coach from the Patriots, a guy who's coached a team that's played a lot of man coverage, where Kaiir Elam kind of earned his stripes in college playing on Florida and never really, to be honest, he might just not be good, right? But we're going to maybe give him one more go at it in 2025 with a new coach. And the fact of the matter is, you don't have Rasul Douglas anymore. You're probably not bringing him back. You have Christian Benford and Jamarcus Ingram, and your room is thin at corner, kind of like the conversation we had with DaQuan Jones. The room is pretty thin. Now, I don't think Kaiir Elam is very good, and I don't think his future is with Buffalo anyway beyond 2025. So if you can find a trade partner like the Jacksonville Jaguars, and you can even get a 6th round pick for him or a 7th round pick from somebody, I think you really have to highly consider it. Again, I'm not trying to create holes just for the sake of creating holes, but I do think the Bills could be okay going into the season with a guy like Jamarcus Ingram penciled in, at least going into free agency in the draft, as the guy next to Christian Benford, knowing that you're likely going to address this position in free agency or the draft, because you really have to, outside of defensive line, probably the position you're going to have to address just next.
So I think you laid it out perfectly. I think he's the kind of guy that you hear about being moved like the morning of day 3, going into that Saturday, where we've now finished. It's Saturday morning. We've finished the first 3 rounds of the draft. That means that each of those teams have gone through free agency. Each of those teams have had their first 3 rounds of draft picks. And now Now you have the teams who are like, man, yeah, we kind of thought we were going to get a little bit more at corner, and we haven't really done that. Let's take a little poke around who's out there and available. And the Bills will also be in the spot of, oh, did we sign I know Aaron advocates for Stephon Gilmore, but whoever it may be, we saw that Travarius Ward was thrown out there as connected to the Bills. Did we go out there and sign a guy who is a pretty obvious starter opposite of Christian Benford, where then, okay, well, now a 4th round pick could be the backup. And if you go into the season and you have, veteran starter X, Christian Benford, Jamarcus Ingram, and a 4th round pick, well, okay, now you're starting feeling a little bit better. And that's where you go in. And I think your number makes sense, David, where you said, it's probably a thing where at best it's one of our 6th rounders and Elam for a 5th. I think that's the best you do. We don't have a 7th, but it would be that kind of thing of, doing that kind of move where we go to Jacksonville. They didn't get the investment they needed. They're on a new regime. They have snaps to give. They can let them compete in camp. And it's, hey, we'll give you Elam in one of our 6th for your 5th. We move up a little bit in the round. I think that's the kind of move there. So let's project that we do find a trade partner for Kaiir Elam. I think somebody in the chat, TP, had mentioned that you just our bust for your bust. We'll do Kaiir Elam for Mozzie Smith. Sure, let's give it a shot.
I think we're at the point where the Bills would trade Kaiir Elam and their 3rd 6th round pick to Arizona for their 7th round pick, just to get off the $2.5 million and just to give them a fresh start. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bills were willing to give up a 6th rounder for a 7th rounder, downgrade their swap because it's very low risk at the end of the draft right there, just to get off that $2.5 million.
Yeah, or their Elam, or where their spin saying Elam and a 7th for Arizona 7th just to get off of that money and to open up the $2.57 million. So we'll do that here. We'll assume we find a fresh start for him, give him a chance. We'll add $2.5 million. It gets us up over the $60 million threshold for the amount of cap space that's created. And now one that I wasn't sure where to put him on this list, because it could have been the extension candidates. It could be to let it play out. But one of the reasons that James Cook is one of the candidates I'm going to ask Anthony about is he bumped up where, because of the player performance incentive program, and he was an original selection for the Pro Bowl, James Cook's salary jumped from the $2.2 million range to $5.2 million for this year. Good for him. He earned it. He played great. That's exactly what that incentive program is for. But now it's a little bit more where it comes into play where extending him, you actually could drop his cap hit if we got the extension early. I know he's put out that $15 million number out there. I think more money than Saquon Barkley would be a lot for Bills fans to swallow, but God bless him. Ask for your money. I also have joked that if every NFL player that had an uncle or a brother in their ear telling them they're underpaid or need to hold out, then 90% of the NFL will hold out, because they all have uncles and brothers in their ear telling them that they're underpaid and should hold out. So don't worry about Dalvin. He's not. He's not a factor for Brandon Beane. But with that new increase, where is your mind? I had joked around, and it's funny that Adam had the exact move that I projected. I had thrown it out on Twitter. What if Brandon Beane traded James Cook for the exact draft pick you would need to draft TreVeyon Henderson? Just because I see them as a stylistic similarity. The 6 football games I watched were mostly Ohio State games, were the ones that I watched. So that's all I'm familiar with. Anthony, where's your head on James Cook, the extension, the trade? Would he be a guy that you would be open to looking at that capitalizing before you had to pay him? Would you want to move him into the extension bucket, or do you let him play out this year and see where it goes?
This one was tough for me, just off of my general feelings of giving running backs second contracts and what that positional value is, and the type of skill set that I personally look for in giving a running back like a second type of contract. I thought Cook, obviously, and I think a lot of us, like, a tremendous year with what he was able to do.
21 touchdowns between the regular season and the playoffs. Amazing season.
And I think, my biggest gripe coming out of the Kansas City game, aside from, the specifics of how it ended and some calls and stuff, my biggest gripe was just not giving the ball to James Cook more. Cook was just rolling, and his fit in this offense, what he's done coming from Georgia, being more of like a pass catching back and a juice back, and all of a sudden Now he's got pacing down and he understands how to let the blocks develop and how he's gone from just being more of a primary zone runner to being able to function in gap because he lets the play breathe. He understands how to set up his blocks.
You don't often see contact balance be improved in the way that he has.
Yes. His ability to improve his contact balance and improve his physicality while not losing the juice aspect. How many touchdowns or gains has he had this year where there's nothing outside and he's just like, okay, cool, I'm going to just beat this guy to the corner and turn around, whether it's a linebacker or an edge, or if a corner or a safety takes the wrong angle, he makes you pay for it in a heartbeat.
I had to stop. Like my natural instinct, anytime I see a guy try to bounce it outside that isn't like Saquon or something stupid or Jahmyr Gibbs, is that like, no, don't edit, because it always ends up being like you string it out, and some of them are the dumb 3-yard losses that you end up eating, but it almost never works out. I had to stop with him because he kept beating guys to the corner and turning it into significant gains where I'm like, whatever, dude, just if you see an angle that I don't see, God bless you.
Yeah. And a lot of those runs are those duo runs where there is an unblocked defender by design, and usually you're trying to make it be, the nickel or the outside corner. And Cook has just become so efficient and significantly good at bouncing it and either beating that corner with speed or beating that corner with physicality. And to just improve his game stylistically, physically, all of these things, it was a huge boon to him this year. My biggest issue with giving him the extension that, I'm not giving him $15 million a year. Like, that's not happening. I'm out. But giving him an extension.
Sneak preview. Neither is Brandon Beane.
Yeah, not happening. My biggest issue with keeping him long-term, I do think some of his value is hindered a bit because of his pass protection ability. It's gotten better and it has improved. But so much of, as James says in the comments there, like Cook is dynamic. He is dynamic. But he'd have even more dynamic value if you could keep him on the field on third down because he's capable of being a pass protector, and then you could do receiving things or more run things. Like the fact that, and this is no knock on Ty Johnson because I like Ty Johnson, but Ty Johnson was the third down back because of his run ability, his pass catching ability, and the pass pro ability. Cook, now this year,
we almost found his receiving ability as found money as a bonus. Fair. He needed to be in there because he could protect Josh Allen, and then it ended up being like, oh, he's pretty good at catching the ball. This is a bonus.
Oh man, he's Randy Moss on third downs and off script. Like, who would have thought this? And I think Cook has improved as a pass protector. He had some really nice blocks this year, also had some misses. It's never been a strong suit of his game. Some of it I do think is tied to his frame and his stature, but with the thickness, the physicality, maybe that improves this year a little bit. I say all that to say that I really like him and I would like him to stay. Previous to this year, I was not even considering giving him a second contract. I am in that boat if it's the right price. But aside from that, right now, I'm not looking at extension right now. If we're just talking about the trade bucket, I would be willing to trade him if I can get a day 2 pick back. Because
my line was 75. I need a top 75 pick. I need a top half of the third round pick or better, where it doesn't have to be Travion Henderson, where I can get another starting caliber running back and just swap him and restart the rookie contract clock. I need that in return.
That's exactly it. Like, I'm looking, and all jokes aside, like if I'm trading him, then I'm like, okay, can I get Travion Henderson? Can I get Quinshon Judkins? Can I get Caleb Johnson? Again, like I need a running back in return that is stylistically different enough from Ray Davis and can still function within the dynamics of this offense. So it almost, all jokes aside, like almost like, oh, would you trade him for the guaranteed pick to get you Travion Henderson? But it kind of has to be like, because if you trade Cook, you then need to fill that spot with ideally unless you're signing a running back in free agency, but I'd rather draft it with who's out there. So it would have to be a day 3 pick for me. I like your idea, top 75. But I'm not moving him unless I can get that like almost kind of guaranteed.
So for tonight's transactions, we're going to keep him as is because I am under the assumption that we're not going to get a top 75 pick for
Agreed.
James Cook, and that I also don't think there's any reason to move him. Everything that we've seen is that, and I will say TP's not wrong that if somebody was going to splurge on him, the Cowboys trading one of their picks for James Cook would not be the craziest thing I've ever seen. So
looking at you, Raiders.
Hey, we'll give Greg Boris a call, see if he can put in a good word for us. So unless we get something like that, I think by far the most likely is that we bring back James Cook, let him have another really nice season. As Adam said here, is I think very legitimately our best offensive weapon. I had him voted on our show in our postseason recap show as my non-Josh Allen MVP of the team. He was fantastic. I would love to have him again. And then I kind of expect him to walk in free agency, and I'll root for him when he's on the Raiders or the Jaguars or whatever.
And part of it too, right? Because I see some of the comments, and even like your thought there, like I thought he was the second best player on this offense from a skill position standpoint, aside from Allen. Did a ton of work this year, but with how good that offensive line is, how good Aaron Kromer is, how good the structure and scheme of how they built this offense to function in the modern NFL. I'm not saying you can easily replicate what Cook did, because a lot of it is tied to his skill set, but you can use that money to fill other needs and then draft somebody that can minimize or mitigate that type of loss while still functioning within that good offensive line and the insulated system you've built.
Yeah. And anyone who says he's going to hold out or something like that, Brandon Beane can go to him and say, hey, are you really that confident that Ray Davis and Ty Johnson won't look good behind this line and you're going to create leverage in that situation? Are you sure? I think there's the benefit that he got this incentive. Like he kind of anything he would have held out for is the $3.5 million raise he got through the performance like incentive or escalator program. Like he got a nice little bump that's going to like make this year worth it and make it that you don't want to hold out and lose that. The Hassan Reddick lost it was $11 million in his holdout that he had to his fines and things were. James Cook doesn't want that. So everything we've seen so far now, admittedly, he's the best running back that Brandon Beane has drafted. He's better than Zach Moss. He's better than Devin Singletary. We'll see where Ray Davis goes, but right now it probably looks like he's as good or better than Ray Davis of where that is. And I'd like to see that clock start again because that's what we've seen so far. Is you let the other guy leave. You stack the next layered replacement, you let that guy leave, and so on. And so you rinse and repeat. And I assume that our backfield in 2026 will be Ray Davis, maybe Ty Johnson or a Ty Johnson-ish running back, and whoever our day 2, early day 3 pick is in 2026. And because that's what we've seen 3 other times. They've done it over and over again. So Ray Davis and that guy will be a perfectly good backfield behind Aaron Kromer's latest creation that season. All right. We've now made it through base salary restructures, release candidates, extension candidates, trade candidates. And the people are asking, guys, you haven't talked about Dawson Knox or Matt Milano or Tyler Bass. Why? It's because their contracts are kind of weird and there's not really a lot of incentive to do them. But we're going to go through each of them just to answer some of those questions. I'm going to start with Dawson Knox. And I didn't even list Curtis Samuel for the same reason that Dawson Knox is going to be talked about here by Steve. Both of them just had contract guarantees that came into place a day after the Super Bowl. So there is no leverage on the team's part. Mm-hmm. Dawson Knox already took a pay cut and took himself from a $12 to $13 million tight end down to a $9 million tight end. If you want to argue that you don't think Dawson Knox is a $9 million tight end, I won't yell at you. It's not a good value as a contract. But the people who are yelling at me right now on the internet, he's better than you think. Like he's a better player than you think he is. He's an incredibly good blocker and he catches. And yes, 300 yards isn't winning you a fantasy championship, but he's a good player that would be unemployed for 15 minutes. Like if we released him, he would have a list of offers and they would not be minimum contract offers. He would have $5 and $6 million contract offers immediately. And it wouldn't shock me if he got a Dalton Schultz contract from someone else because he's not that much different than those guys like Jake Ferguson and Dalton Schultz and other players that are getting reasonable contracts there. So do you feel differently? Do you mess with Dawson Knox? Do you try to do anything with his deal, Steve?
No, I was telling you, I was kind of frustrated. Like, you post something on social media and like half the comments are cut Dawson Knox. His 300 yards aren't worth how much he gets paid. But like, if you look at it, if you release Dawson Knox before June 1st, you are eating $17 million and saving a whopping negative $2.5 million. You're taking
to cut him. It costs more to cut him.
Yeah. If you trade him, you're eating $12.5 million in dead cap and saving $2 million. If you try to release or trade him after June 1st, you're eating $9.5 million this year. You're eating $7.5 million next year, and you're saving $5 million. A trade, you would save almost $10 million post June 1st, but who wants him after post June 1, right? And you're still eating $5 and $7 million in dead cap over the next 2 years. It's just not happening. Like, it's a weird contract, right? That's why you labeled this whole segment weird contracts. There's no moving on from him. Period. End of story. He was a valuable piece in 2024. He's a great run blocker. He made some timely catches. Is he worth that money? No, he is not. Could you maybe possibly ask him to take another pay cut? Maybe, but if we're sitting here at $60 million plus in cap space, why kick another can down the road when you don't need to? Just let the man play with his contract as is.
We'll have this conversation next year. I do think next year there is a point where the team will have leverage to ask him to take a pay cut. Because again, I still think he's a valuable NFL player. He would be signed immediately if out on the market. But next year, the cash that we owe him, it will be this year it's 9.5. Next year it jumps to $12 million. We can easily go to him and be like, listen, you're not getting $12 million on the open market. Why don't you stay for X? That's already crossed this year. We already guaranteed his money for this year. We have no leverage. There's nothing we can do. So you could be mad that Dawson Knox is on the team. Dawson Knox is going to be on the team. And TP, I don't know that he's wrong, that he might currently be our best tight end. It pains me a little bit that might be accurate, but that might be accurate.
Well, especially for a team that likes to run 12 personnel and have their tight ends block, and Dalton Kincaid can't do that.
Correct. It would be lovely.
Guys, he's going to lift some weights this offseason. He's going to drink a lot of protein. It's going to be fine.
Bulk up. It's going to bulk up. We're getting a new strength and conditioning coach. It's to
bulk up. Do you hear it's going to be the boom guy?
Oh God.
The Costco guy?
Yeah, he's gonna get Dalton Kincaid.
He's gonna bring the boom.
I could buy that. He's
gonna bring the boom.
Yeah,
he's gonna get Dalton Kincaid swole. It's gonna be great. All right, David. How about another player that gets asked about maybe more than Dawson Knox, Mr. Matthew Milano?
Yeah, it's funny. It's like Matt Milano went from being kind of one of the most fan favorite players on this team to now being a bit of a polarizing figure when it comes to the 2025 offseason. You have a lot of people saying he's not worth the money, et cetera, et cetera. Look, I saw Matt Milano when he came back from injury last year that was improving each week, made an impact, certainly helped in the run game as well. The linebacker position on the Buffalo Bills is one position where, like, I don't want to touch this position if I don't have to. I'm perfectly fine paying Matt Milano under his current contract. He has 2025 and 2026 left on his contract. He was getting back to form at the end of last year. I know he's had some pretty big injuries where he's missed time, but again, like Steve said with Knox, if you've already created $60 million in cap space, like, let Matt Milano and Terrel Bernard get another crack at this next year as a tandem. And then, yes, maybe we can talk about this at the end of the 2025 season going into 2026, which is the last year on his deal. But I am perfectly fine. Kind of just, again, do you touch? Was your kind of question in the notes? No, I don't. I let Milano play out on his current contract. And that is also partially based on what I saw, how he was playing at the end of the season. I thought he was playing pretty well. And is he worth the money that you're paying him? Maybe not, but maybe not that far off from what you're paying him if he kind of can play like he did at the end of the season for 2025. And then, like I said, have this conversation again at the end of 2025. And like, as we look at like his numbers here, right? If you cut him, you're losing actual cap space. You're losing.
It costs more to cut him than it does to keep him.
It costs more to cut him. Yes, you can cut him post June 1st and kind of push that dead cap split in, about $9 million to $10 million each in 2025 and 2026. But I just don't think that's something that you would really consider unless something really weird happens in the offseason. Again, the linebacker position, I'm really set on for the Bills. It's one of the few areas where you really don't even need to make a move, to be honest. And so I'm letting him play it out.
Yeah. And again, I think some people feel differently about it. Just a couple examples. When there was a post going around Twitter the last couple of days here where they were asking, hey, who are your top 10 linebackers? And some really sharp people had Milano and Bernard both listed. I know I can't remember. I think Brett Coleman had Milano like 8th. Ben Solak had him 7th. There's a lot of people who still think very, very highly of Matt Milano, and we still saw those flashes of where he played. I know that the cap hit is one thing, but it's because we pushed old money into this year. He's not a $15.8 million $0.8 million guy in cash. We're paying him $9.9 million. That's what the team will view it as. We can't do anything about that previous cash we paid him that we moved into the future. We did that because we had to get under the cap last year. So releasing him now doesn't fix that. It doesn't undo that. So I know Adam had made a comment there in the chat that he's not that guy. The team's not paying him that. He's a $9.9 million guy. That's the cash that we owe him. The reason the cap hit's high is because he helped us get under the cap in previous seasons. I will say next year he is a pay cut candidate. Right now, his agent also knows that we have no leverage and we can't really afford to cut him, and that he costs us more cap space to cut him than he does to just keep him. His agent knows that too. So if I was representing Matt Milano, I would laugh. If Brandon Beane has me take a pay cut, go ahead, release him. We'll go get that cash somewhere else. You can count more money this year to do that. Next year, Brandon Beane has the leverage, and they'll be able to go to him and be like, hey, we want to keep you around one more year. We'll see where it goes. But again, we'll see if they see that he's ready to lose a step in camp and he's not the guy that they thought he was, and Dorian Williams looks awesome, and Ulofoshio takes a step forward, or we draft a guy who looks awesome. Maybe that comes into play, and he is the one guy that I would put on my huge surprise cut down day person, because he's the one guy that there is a chance in camp that he just doesn't have it, and that's when they find out is oh man, we thought you were ready to come back, and we any flashes we saw last year just aren't there, and it's not here, and then all of a sudden we go there. But as TP said here, right now with the flashes he showed at the end of last year, he'd get an $8 to $10 million contract. He would be somebody's starting linebacker, and he would get paid that way. So again, is there a little wiggle room where you can play around with something? I don't want to restructure anything. I don't want to kick any further cans down the road. That's how his cap number is already bloated here this year. But if we get a full season of what we saw at the end of the year last year, we're going to be happy, and it's going to be in good shape. So we'll leave him as is. Another guy, our last one here in this weird contract bucket for Anthony, is a player that I think a lot of people were 100% fully ready to move on from. And then he made every single kick the rest of the season, and now everybody kind of quieted down and wasn't as concerned. Where is your head at with Mr. Tyler Bass?
Yeah, they brought in other kickers midweek, whatever week that was, and competition, and Bass still beat him out. And then they tried it again, and he beat him out again. And it was pretty solid down the stretch. Because of that, for me, it's pretty simple. He was solid down the stretch. I think kind of restored his credibility and faith amongst a lot of the fan base. And just for what he was doing on the field, I'm fine with. And really the contract, and again, in this whole bucket, it's just muddy. The juice really isn't worth the squeeze. If you cut him from now up to March 16th, it's a dead cap hit of $3 million and you're only saving 1.6. If you change it and you cut him between March 16th and June 1st, it's a dead cap hit of $5.9 million, and you actually
he has a guarantee trigger on March 17th that guarantees a chunk of his money on the 16th.
So from the 16th up to June 1st, you're losing money further. There literally is no savings. You're taking a hit in addition to the dead cap. And then we've talked about the kind of post June 1st stuff and how that's not really helping you do anything. I just don't think the juice is worth the squeeze to get rid of him. And aside from that, he kind of restored the faith a little bit down the stretch and when they needed him to. So I'm good just kind of sitting tight and letting him rock, and hopefully he just gets back to the swagger and the confidence that he had previously, and that the yips are gone.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing you can ask for is that 51-yarder he hit in the AFC Championship game. He absolutely crushed and put it into the net 3/4 of the way up the uprights from 51 yards. He hit the 63-yard game winner, or 61-yard game winner against Miami. He hit some really clutch kicks down the stretch that at minimum, I would say the worst case scenario is I'm fine with if they brought in a Jake Camarda. If they brought in a competition guy and that guy beat him, and new special teams coordinator Chris Tabor says, hey, this is our guy, and he beats him in camp, and then you're like, well, it's not perfect, but I'll take some of the cap savings for in-season spending, and this other guy beat him, and
it's
that's
fine.
$3
million savings post June 1st.
Yeah, $3.6 million. It's not nothing. And it at least if nothing else, you roll that over and it covers the dead cap you would kick into 2026, and like, all right, whatever, we got back the 1.6 million we would have gotten the other way around. So I think that's the only scenario I could see, and I don't think it's likely. I think by far the most likely is Tyler Bass is our kicker in, honestly, 2025 and beyond. Like I think, we saw, if nothing else, like Evan McPherson had a horrible year. I'm not going to touch any of the off season or off field stuff that's getting worse by the day. Justin Tucker had a horrible season. Like some Young Hoku, like some really, really like high end dependable. Who's the guy who killed us against Houston? Kaimi Fairbairn, like killed us and then missed like 4 of his next 7 kicks in the coming games after there. Like this was a super, super weird season for kickers, and everybody except for the Pittsburgh kicker was missing kicks left and right. That it was just a weird season. So, again, if somebody beats him out, great. But if not, I think by far the most likely is Tyler Bass is the Bills kicker, not only in 2025, but probably finishing out his contract. He probably stays here and is here for a while. Yeah, Jake Elliott had his worst season ever and absolutely crushed the ball in the Super Bowl, making every single kick dead center. So, kicking's weird, man. Kicking's hard. All right. We have now made it through every player I could think of, and everyone that I had out there is a reasonable question, but I wanted to leave it open to the panel here. So I'm going to go around 1 or 2 times, depending on how creative you guys want to get. So we will start with you, Steve. You will go first. This is, okay, hear me out, and I will listen about any other possible wacky proposals. And for anybody listening here, we will each get one. We're not going to do a lot of spending on tonight's show with the cap space that we created, but we will take at least one stab each at like something fun that we can throw out there as a wish list item of something we would do to splurge with the extra cap space we created. Right now, we are at $61.4 million in cap space. We've extended everybody. We've kept all the right players. What else could we do to create any other cap space?
Pass.
I like it. Honestly, I don't think it's crazy. In previous years, we've had some really tough ones where like it was there, but I did want to leave the option open. David, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's not a whole lot more to say, and so you don't even have to come to me.
Just for credit for the 3 guys, this isn't because they're not creative. It's because we don't have a lot of other contracts to play with. There aren't a ton of other things you can do that are out there as options.
Yeah, so you only have to come to me once on this, so I'll give my 2 really quickly. One we already kind of mentioned, right? You could cut David Edwards and save $4 million and trust in Aaron Cromer and Alec Anderson and potentially another free agent. I mean, David Edwards is a free agent after 2025 anyway. We didn't really discuss him as a possible extension candidate. So that's one way you could create another $4 million. I'm not necessarily for it, but it is an option. DaQuan Jones, who I talked about earlier, this is, again, not likely, but if you found a desperate team that was willing to maybe trade for DaQuan Jones, you could actually create $4 million in cap space by trading him prior to June 1st. But again, it's not likely that someone's going to want to take that on. It is possible. Maybe you get like a 7th round pick for him in a trade. That could create more cap space than just outright releasing him. But again, I don't think it's likely, and I don't necessarily am promoting either of those options, but those are 2 options that would give you about $4 million a piece.
Interesting. I like it. I obviously I had thought about the David Edwards one, but I didn't think about the DaQuan Jones ones. I like the creativity. Anthony, how about you?
I guess I'm in the minority on this one based on what Tilt just said, and even Greg, your thoughts and some of the comments I've seen in the chat. I'm not long term. I like David Edwards, and I'm not opposed to extending him for like a year.
Okay.
I'm not either.
He's a Cromer disciple. What he did with the Rams.
I was going to say, a lot of people don't realize, like, he was very specifically brought with Aaron. When Aaron Cromer came here, we only brought one guy from LA. It was David Edwards.
Yeah. And I think he goes very unnoticed and under the radar, but in like a good way, because he just does good offensive lineman things. He's got good hand usage. Everything that Cromer teaches and practices, Edwards puts into actuality. He is kind of the poster child of it. And at what his cost is, I would love to lower the cap hit. I don't like him having a cap hit like around 5, but again, if it's not broken, don't fix it. I like what this offensive line does. And that trio of Dion Dawkins, especially with how wide his splits are and what he likes to do to play on an island, having this technically sound, familiar left guard next to him who breeds that familiarity and that technicality and that sound system play, I think goes a long way towards building that consistency with what we continue to have. So I guess it's maybe not like crazy, but I would potentially look to, that would be like my only thing because we've addressed so much. I would look to extend him 1, potentially 2, just to make sure the money works out the right way, knock down that cap hit a little bit. And then if Alec Anderson is the guy next year, you could potentially get out of the Edwards deal, depending on how you layer it. Or if you draft a guy, let him simmer for a year or 2. And that's the kind of Prince that was promised to take over. But I do think Edwards is a bit underrated, and I would not be opposed to keeping him around.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely in play. And again, I was only half joking earlier on my comment is everything offensive line driven right now is fully self-fulfilling for me, because if Aaron Kromer says the guy's ready, okay. Like what he's done with Spencer Brown, what he's turned Osiris Torrance into, how we moved on from Mitch Morris into Connor McGovern, what he's allowed David Edwards to be, what Alec Anderson looks to be as the NFL 6th man of the year. If he tells me that Alec Anderson's ready to be the starting guard and Talon Grable is our new 6th man jumbo set guy, but okay. Like if Aaron Kromer says it's time, it's time. The same way, if we extend David Edwards, I'm just going to go, oh, well, Aaron Kromer must have told Brandon Beane that we need to keep David Edwards, but I guess that's the right deal. Like I am in full like blind trust of whatever Aaron Kromer says we should do is what we should do.
I actually got one that came to me, and it's something that we brought up a couple of weeks ago on the Air Raid Hour. I don't necessarily would love if we did this, and I wouldn't do it for all of the trade candidates. But if it was like Micah Parsons or it was Myles Garrett, I wouldn't even think twice about it. But if you add Gregory Rousseau into a trade, that's $13 million in savings. It opens up a hole. Like I wouldn't do it for Max Crosby, who's like pushing 28. Like I wouldn't do it for Max Crosby, but for a Micah Parsons or a Myles Garrett, trading Gregory Rousseau, even though it opens up a hole on the other side, does save you $13.5 million, which you can then go pay the other guy with, and reduces the amount of draft capital you have to use on them.
This is a good conversation. I like that idea.
I do like, I'm a little torn because part of me, I really like the idea. I like Gregory Rousseau more as an overqualified 2 than I do as a like lagging 1. So like if we go get the guy that's opposite him, I like him even more of what I think he can, like the force multiplier element of him. But you're not wrong from a financial standpoint. He is the most financially beneficial trade candidate because we would have 0 dead cap. His entire cap hit is his 13.387 or 13.387 5th-year option salary. It's fully guaranteed, so we can't get out of it. But if you trade it, it all goes with every dollar. And it would be similar to my comment with James Cook that like James Cook's value to the 2025 Buffalo Bills is high enough that I'm not trading him for like some 4th round, 5th round pick. So if somebody wants to give us a premium pick for it, like in my mind, if somebody wants to overpay for James Cook, like, okay, I'll listen now. So I wouldn't throw Gregory Rousseau into anything. But if it's like, oh, it would have been 2 1st round picks and a 4th, and instead now it's a 1st round pick, Gregory Rousseau, and a 3rd pick. Oh, maybe. All right, so you're telling me that you're going to basically give us back the 30th overall pick, a late 1st, early 2nd round value for what we paid for Gregory Rousseau. You'll give me back that in value. But I wasn't expecting to do that. But let me talk to my team. I'll call you back. Like I would need to think about it. I would need to actually at least consider, like, hey, maybe. All right, we might need to have a phone call about this one. I like it. I like it. I think those are good ones to throw out there. So we won't execute on any of those, but I do think a transaction involving David Edwards, something involving, we already had a little bit with DaQuan Jones, but something involving Gregory Rousseau, I do think that those are in play and something that could possibly happen. And again, we talked about earlier, that's the kind of thing where you have the conversation with Gregory Rousseau's team ahead of time. They're asking for the moon. You're not going to get the extension, and somebody says that they're going to value him as a like premium asset. All of a sudden, it's like, maybe we can talk, and we'll see where it goes. All right, guys, we have come to the end of the show. We have now created over $60 million in cap space. Again, we're not going to spoil it because all of us have shows between the Air Raid Hour, Disguise Coverage, Film Room, Cover One Buffalo, all the shows around the Cover One universe here. We're going to have all kinds of fun in our trade candidates and free agency wish lists and all the other things of where we want to spend money. But we got to have a little fun here tonight. So we'll go around the horn here. We're going to go. We'll start with you, Steve. Who is your wish list splurge item? If you could go out there and do one thing, who's the guy you would go after and grab with some of this cap space we created?
My original thought was Max Crosby, but I've been there and done that. So I'm going to go something a little different. I'm going to do something a little different because I think you all are going to pick defensive ends. How about DK Metcalf?
Maybe nice call.
Maybe DK Metcalf, just get him to come here and just run verticals. Oh, Dave, did I steal your thunder?
That's okay. I had two options. It's okay.
Just tell him to come here and run a straight line, and that'll solve all of our problems on offense.
Yeah,
not that we have any problems on offense.
Yeah, correct. It's we got some first world problems on offense.
It can truly be a video game experience if we had DK Metcalf.
Yeah, that's fun. I like that one. All right, David, how about you?
I like the DK Metcalf one because he's a little bit of redemption for the Cody Ford fiasco from years back, right? Look,
if somebody says trade for Creed Humphrey, I'm going to flip out.
Listen, I kind of hinted at it earlier. I think like going to kind of cheat and mention two things here. Like the DJ Jones signing, I think by freeing up some of this cap space makes just so much sense to me with the guys you have under contract in that room right now. Really only Daquan, Oliver, and Dwayne Carter kind of notably right under contract. I know they have Dean and Zion Logue. But then the other thing I was thinking is like, if the Bills want to make a trade and they have cap space, but they don't love the idea of giving up multiple first-round picks or a ton of draft capital or throwing in guys to deals, like you can go for a trade on a guy that's slightly older. He's age 30. The Bills have made trades with this team in the past, and I'm talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. Duke Tobin, who's been the director of player personnel with the Cincinnati Bengals since 1999. He was part of the trade that the Bills made when they traded the Bengals Cordy Glenn. The Bengals right now are trying to find ways to keep T. Higgins and their main core of guys around Joe Burrow. And I also don't think that Trey Hendrickson would cost you as much in a trade as someone like a Crosby, as someone like a Garrett, as someone like a Parsons, who I know you guys are going to talk about. But he is coming off back-to-back 17.5 sack seasons. He got to the quarterback a ton on a defense that was pretty damn bad last year and pretty bad in 2020.
Where he was like the guy you had to
a defensive player of the year shortlist candidate, was one of the 5 at the end that were nominated for defensive player of the year and invited to the player NFL awards. I know he's 30, and I know the Bengals probably wouldn't do it, but there is a history there of the Bills making a trade with this team and Duke Tobin, who's been with that organization. Obviously, the ownership's going to end up being involved in that, as we know with the Bengals, it always is. But he is a guy that has been involved with Brandon Beane in the past on trades. So for me, probably less than what we would have to give up. Obviously, it would be less than we'd have to give up for Parsons or Garrett or Crosby. Trey Hendrickson is appealing to me if you're in the kind of camp of not wanting to break the bank in what you're giving away, but still getting a guy who probably does have, and again, going into his last year, you'd have to give him like a 2 or 3 year extension, but maybe not as big of a cost as it would be for some of those other guys.
Okay. Anthony.
I didn't do any defensive ends because I figured everybody was going to do defensive ends. It's funny, the DK Metcalf one, I considered a little bit. I like that. That was a good call from you guys. Realistic moonshot splurge. Tilt already mentioned it. I want DJ Jones, and then I want Dante Fowler. I want athleticism and juice off the edge, and I want a violent, nasty plugger on the inside who has enough athleticism to still get upfield and cause problems. DJ Jones is just the perfect fit. I think it's realistic that they could get him. Same thing with Fowler with what their anticipated cost would be. Those are my realistic ones. More like moonshot type of splurge. I want Javon Holland. I am a coverage guy. I am a defense guy. The versatility that nice from Cam Morty. We're right here. The versatility that he affords you on the back end, whoever he's playing with, if you pair him with Rapp, if you pair him with Cole Bishop, whatever, but his ability to play in the post, his ability to play in two high structures, you can line up. I remember a couple years ago in that stupid Heat game that the Bills lost in Miami, he's lining up on the edge, like towards the boundary side. And then on the snap, he's spinning to the post and covering the deep third, and it's cover 3. Just like what he affords you, his coverage background, his physicality. I know that safety isn't necessarily a premium position, and you know how people feel about paying some of them, but that would be my splurge and just what you could do on the back end with him. It just opens. He's a force multiplier in a multitude of ways.
When I saw that Miami wasn't going to franchise tag him, I was like, I'm like, really? Like,
yeah,
that's like that
would be such an FU move too if we went and signed him.
And also, yeah, very much like, oh, you guys
audibly
Jordan
Poyer.
Poyer. Yeah.
I what you just said, Anthony, is literally what went through my head.
Poyer,
like,
we'll take
like, well, you guys stole Poyer, we got Holland, we're even. It's totally fine. This is what same.
Yeah.
Like the risk of releasing a guy into what now, with how running back bounced back a little bit, probably what is the most deflated market of any position group. Like, that is such a dangerous game the Dolphins are playing, that like that is just such a weird spot to mess around with. They're playing a weird game of chicken there, and I am excited to see them lose that game of chicken. I don't expect it to be in Buffalo, but I'm excited that I think they're going to lose Javon Holland, and that's great because that less talented players for them is great.
I'm excited to not have to root against Javon Holland because I like watching him play, and I'm always like, oh, he's on my
like I go sign in the Rams or go sign with like wherever. I don't care.
The Raiders.
Go hang out with Steve. Go sign with the Cardinals. Put him next to Buda Baker. Let him be the.
Oh my God, that would be so sick. And then Jalen Thompson is the third. Oh man,
God, move those guys around.
You don't understand that. The Darren Taylor Demerson's taken over.
I'm not on that train. I'm sorry.
Fun fact on Javon Holland. I've only ever gotten to interview one player in the pre-draft process and on like a media thing, and it was Javon Holland.
Nice. That's a pretty good claim.
You're saying he's got Bill's
1 for 1.
And
I asked him.
Clearly,
I asked him, in one of my question to him at the time was if because he's from Oregon, if he had ever kind of mirrored any of his game after Jarris Byrd was one of the questions I asked him.
Nice. It's good.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for a good safety. I would also not be opposed if Malachi Starks fell at 30. I don't care who's on.
You went to the Eagles in a Daniel Jeremiah's mock, and I wanted to punch my head through a wall. Yes.
Oh my God, that's such a good fit too. Yeah, I'd be so
disgusting. Disgusting. All right. My final one, I do think you can have some fun. There are guys who should not be available. Like the Raiders should not trade Max Crosby. The Browns should not trade Myles Garrett. None of those things should happen. Like all of that should be where it is. I know, like, it sounds like Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa are both going to be available. There's a lot of stuff out there where we can splurge at edge. A lot of them, understandably, fans are kind of gun shy by Von Miller. I will always argue that up until his injury, he was earning every penny of what's there. He ended that first Chiefs game by sacking Patrick Mahomes. That's literally why we got him. He was earning every penny. He was on pace for a 16 sack season. Everything was looking great. He did not have a history of knee injuries. It sucked. He got a knee injury at his age. It didn't turn out. Then other things complicated it. All the more reason that if I was going to do a crazy moonshot, gross overpay thing, it would be Micah Parsons. Like, he is the definition of a guy who never becomes available. Justin Jefferson doesn't become available. Like, those guys who are like the premier, young, healthy, elite players at the top of their position, they do not become available. The only scenario is where you have an antiquated, kind of cheap owner who thinks of himself, bigger than the team, that thinks the star on their helmet has value and there should be a discounted element, and who just handed out like $100 million in deals to his two other players, and now is in a weird position that, like, he certainly, you should be able to move heaven and earth to just pay Micah Parsons the, honestly, like 6 years, $210 million, and he should get like $35 million a year. You should make him the highest paid defensive player in the league. I think the trade might be the most any defensive player has ever gone for in league history. Like, I think it might be more than the Jalen Ramsey trade, and I'd still do it. Like, he is, you don't get that elite level of player at his age, at his health, to plug in. If we were to create this kind of cap space, that's the ultimate splurge. Of course, Myles Garrett's amazing. Of course, Max Crosby's amazing. Trey Hendrickson, all the other guys we talked about. Any big splurge at edge would be awesome, and I would welcome it. But if I'm going to take a shot for the moon, those players do not become available. They simply don't come available. And the fact that there's even a non-zero chance, I think there is a chance where Micah Parsons could become available. You have to find out absolutely anything you could do to make that possible, to bring in a player like that.
I got an idea. If the Bengals want to pay T. Higgins, we can take Jamar Chase off their hands.
I do think that those kind of things, like Trey Hendrickson's a slight notch below there, but it's still an elite player. Again, like you said, 17 and a half sacks each the last 2 years. But again, you're also rolling the dice. Like, he's been healthy, but he's 30, and that's kind of where things get a little sketchy and risky. So paying, maybe for him, it's our higher of the 2 second-round picks, and then also still having to give him like $40 million over 2 years, like you're sure $50 million over the next 2 years, is still probably a big risk in where you're at. But again, we'll celebrate it and root for Trey Hendrickson if he's the guy. Micah Parsons opposite Gregory Rousseau would be so amazing. You put, it's just magical
all the things,
all the
feelings.
All right, guys, we did it. We created $60 million in cap space. We created so many opportunities to be able to play around with all the things that we could do. We talked about all the realistic scenarios. We didn't go on some mass headhunting spree, releasing everyone that's there. We were able to accomplish many, many things. All of those pieces, Micah Parsons piece is a shout out to our friends at William Mattar Law Offices. My here to help is bringing Micah Parsons to the Buffalo Bills. So thank you, William, for helping make that happen. He's been a fantastic sponsor for us. We appreciate everything that he's done for us here. We'll go around the horn here. Dave, Steve, I'll let you guys go together. What's coming up next on the Air Raid Hour? What can fans watch out for?
Yeah, we got a busy slate coming up. I know we got our combine preview next week, then our combine recap the week after, and then the NFL always loves to do us a favor, and that sort of tampering window opens up on that Monday night when we do our show. So that's always a big hit. So that's the next 3 weeks for us, and then we'll dabble with whoever the Bills sign after that, and we're going to get into our position previews. And what fans can expect from us is every position of need for the Buffalo Bills. You will know every single prospect in the draft that the Buffalo Bills could possibly add at those positions. So that's our goal. We've trimmed it down from every position and every player to just positions of need and those players. So we love talking drafts. Our shows go a little longer in the off season than they do in the regular season because we do. So that's what we got coming up. But I know, Dave, you got some other things you want to share as well.
Yeah, and that kind of all is going to culminate in our live draft coverage. Obviously, we have every year. So we're still a couple months away from that. But of course, we'll have you covered at Cover One live draft coverage all 3 days of the draft. And Greg, you're going to the combine as we know, so that'll be cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'll be out there in Indianapolis, being able to check it out. I literally have 2 different reservations at St. Elmo's just to be able to sit there and see what other GMs and head coaches come in to get dinner. So I'm going to sit there.
It's not for 2 steaks. It's not for 2 steaks.
It may also be for
if you're there long enough, of course.
Yeah. I may also. No, I mean 2 different nights. I have reservations 2 different nights for dinners there. And I mean, if I'm there, I might as well have a steak while I'm there. But yeah, looking forward to that and going out. And this is more of a bucket list item. I don't know that there's a ton that you take away from here. I know I joked again that I don't need another Kyron Williams and Bucky Irving, RAS score to tell me that, like, all right, I need to settle down, and running the 40 isn't like the most important thing in the world, but I'm excited. It's something I've been watching my whole life. So being able to watch the gauntlet drills in person and watch the different drills in person and hang out and just be around all of their excited. We got our credentials approved earlier. So going to be able to go around and hang out and have some fun to be able to go through. TP's got a good idea. I should have had a Zubez bow tie for my tux here tonight. Anthony, what is coming up next between your fun at disguised coverage in the film room?
So film room, we did some defensive free agent targets tonight, film, advanced metrics, all that stuff. Next week, we're doing the offensive side of the ball and then kind of putting a bow on it as we head into free agency, kind of putting things together. And then obviously you'll get similar levels of positional breakdowns and film stuff going forward for draft coverage. Similar kind of idea for me running on disguised coverage. I'm thinking of doing some more individual solo player film breakdowns to kind of put a bow on some things from the past season, kind of really diving into what Keon Coleman was, what Cole Bishop was, kind of forecasting what they could be going forward. And then I'm waiting for free agency, that tampering window to go so I can kind of put it in my rear view and just go head first and not sleep for about a month and a half and do draft prep and scouting and evaluation, which I'm very excited for.
I love it. Aaron will be back from his vacation and will deserve time off here. Aaron and I will be going into our offensive wish list this next week. Then the following week, I'll do a little recap of my experience at the combine, doing our defensive wish list. And then, like Stephen David said, reacting to that opening wave of free agency. And now I don't know that we've had as much universal consensus at cover one on a single free agent target as what we have right now with DJ Jones. And I just assume it's not possible. Like, there's just way too much consensus of like the price, the fit, the position, the style, the scheme, like everything is just right of what would make so much sense. So I'm going to be heartbroken when, of course, on like March 10th, he reaches an extension with Denver to
or
to
no,
stay
or
there.
if he signs like a 2-year, like $6 million deal with just someone awful, and you're just like with the Panthers, and you're just like, what? Like, what? How did this happen?
Who is it? Jeremy Chin was the deal with the Commanders last year, where like you saw they like, wait, like we couldn't have given him.
I knew the
money?
fit wasn't like so seamless, but it was such a cheap deal on a 1 year, and I was just like, really, like, yeah, that
we couldn't have given him no money. We could give him no money. Like you couldn't have gotten no money from us.
That was every safety on the free agent market.
Yeah, I would say Simmons, when Simmons signed so late, it was like 1 year, $5 million or whatever. I was like, I would do that right now. Like, why are we not doing that?
Yeah, correct. I'll give you $5 million and $1. Like, can we do that? All right, guys, we appreciate it. Tonight's been a ton of fun. Always our longest show of the year, but always so much fun and well worth it. Huge shout out to producer Chris Kepner, who kept us up to date with all the different moves as the night went. You guys were fantastic here with us all throughout the night, hanging out and listening live. This is one of our most fun shows. We'll put out some content, wrapping things up afterwards and sharing with you all the different fun things we did. But going through here, not having to rip all the Band-Aids off and still creating $60 million. Hopefully this gives you the reassurance that we're going to be just fine. We're going to be able to create all the space we need to do the moves we did. I promise for Brandon Bean, it probably won't be $60 million, but he's going to be able to create plenty without too much difficulty and go out there and get us some of the players we need. So on behalf of producer Chris Kepner, David Tilton, Steve Mathes, Anthony Prohaska, I am Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to the Cover One Buffalo Salary Cap Extravaganza. As always, our friends at BetUS remind you to bet responsibly, and our friends over at William Mattar Law Offices, you know the number. Hurt in a car, call William Mattar, 844-444-4444. Do good, be good. God bless. Go Bills.